The Book of Elsewhere by Keanu Reeves and China Miéville. In a world teetering on the precipice of chaos, a man known as Babi, or Unute, moved through the centuries. Tall, with dark hair and eyes that held the weight of eons, he bore the burden of immortality. Unute was a weapon forged in the fires of a forgotten age, capable of incredible feats of strength and resilience. His existence was a paradox, a relentless cycle of violence and rebirth. He yearned for death, for the sweet release of oblivion, but it eluded him. Unute had witnessed civilizations rise and fall, tasted the dust of forgotten empires, and seen the birth and death of countless languages. The passage of time had left its mark on him, a tapestry of scars and memories, each a testament to the endless cycle of his existence. Assigned to a secret military unit, Unute collaborated with scientists and soldiers, lending his unique abilities to their missions. He obeyed orders when it suited him, indifferent to the ideologies and agendas of those he served. He was a force of nature, a walking paradox, a source of both awe and terror. His presence in the unit was a constant reminder of the extraordinary and the impossible, pushing the boundaries of what his comrades believed to be real. During a fateful mission against insurgents, a soldier named Ulafson, driven by grief and a twisted sense of justice, attempted to assassinate Unute. Ulafson, a stocky man with a perpetually sad expression, had come to believe that Unute was a harbinger of death, a malevolent force that needed to be eradicated. With grim determination, he strapped himself with explosives concealed beneath an innocuous khaki jacket and detonated himself in a desperate attempt to take Unute with him. The blast ripped through the room with devastating force, leaving a trail of carnage in its wake. The air filled with dust and the acrid smell of explosives, obscuring the aftermath for several long moments. As the dust settled, a scene of destruction was revealed. Amidst the debris and twisted metal, Unute sat, wounded but very much alive. His scorched heart dripped, the wound already beginning to close with unnatural speed. He looked up at the unit's commander, Keanu, a man with a deeply lined dark face and a stoic demeanor. Unute's laughter, a bubbling sound that seemed to rise from the depths of his being, sent chills down the spines of those who witnessed it. Ulafson's sacrifice had failed in its primary objective, but it had ignited a spark of something new within Unute. A deepening sense of unease and a growing fascination with the patterns of death that surrounded him. Haunted by the attack, Unute began to withdraw from the world, seeking solace in the silence of abandoned mission sites. He wandered through the remnants of past conflicts, his eyes seeing beyond the obvious destruction to patterns and messages hidden in the debris. In these quiet, desolate places, Unute attempted to decipher the cryptic language of violence and death, hoping to unravel the mystery of his own existence. He revisited the ruins of a safe house where he had clashed with adversaries, the building now a shell of its former self. Unute stood amidst decaying bodies, their forms obscured by a corrosive agent that had eaten away at flesh and bone. In this macabre scene, he whispered questions into the silence, seeking answers in the configurations of death. The bodies, twisted and contorted, seemed to speak to him in a language only he could understand, hinting at truths just beyond his grasp. Keanu, deeply concerned about Unute's increasingly erratic behavior, took it upon himself to track down the immortal soldier. His search led him to the depths of the abandoned safe house, where he found Unute standing before a sealed tunnel, his flashlight illuminating a grotesque pile of corpses. The beam of light danced over the decaying forms, casting long shadows that seemed to writhe with a life of their own. As Keanu urged Unute to leave, reminding him of the unit's protocols and the need for secrecy and deniability, a message crackled through from the unit's headquarters. The scanners, constantly monitoring for signs of life or activity, had picked up a faint signal emanating from the sealed tunnel, an impossible reading that defied explanation. Signs of life where there should be none but death and decay. Driven by a sudden, inexplicable urgency, Unute sprang into action. With superhuman strength, he began to tear through the rubble blocking the tunnel entrance, ignoring Keever's warnings about the structure's instability. Rocks and debris flew as Unute worked, his hands bleeding and healing in a constant cycle. Keever, after a moment's hesitation, joined in the effort, and together they cleared a path, revealing a narrow, foreboding passageway that stretched into darkness. At the end of the tunnel, illuminated by the weak beams of their flashlights, they found a sight that defied all logic and reason. Thaka, one of their comrades who had been presumed dead, killed in the initial assault on the safe house, was slumped against the wall. A gaping hole marred his head, a wound that should have been instantly fatal. Yet, impossibly, Thaka lived. His eyes flickered with a dim light, and his lips moved in silent, incomprehensible words. Keever, stunned by the impossible scene before him, rushed to Thaka's side. He called out his comrade's name, his voice echoing in the confined space as he checked for signs of life. Thaka's skin was cold to the touch, his whispered words barely audible, but he was undeniably, impossibly alive. As they prepared to evacuate Thaka from the tunnel, his gaze fell upon Unute. In that moment, Thaka's eyes widened with a terror so profound it seemed to transcend his grievous injuries. He began to mumble frantically, his words a jumbled mess of fear and confusion. Fragments about a dog, about questions that needed answers, about a name he could not or would not reveal spilled from his lips. Then, as suddenly as he had returned to life, Thaka slipped away once more. His body grew cold and still in Keever's arms, leaving behind a mystery that would shake the very foundations of the Unute's understanding of life and death. The incident with Thaka shook the Unute to its core, challenging everything they thought they knew about the boundaries between life and death. Diana Ahuja, a brilliant scientist with sharp features and a meticulous nature, led the investigation into this impossible event. Known for her passion for cephalopods and her grudging respect for the military, Diana had been recruited to study Unute and decipher the secrets of his immortality. Now, faced with Thaka's inexplicable resurrection and subsequent death, she found herself delving into realms of science that bordered on the mystical. Diana pored over reports, interviewed witnesses, and analyzed data with relentless determination. She examined tissue samples, ran countless simulations, and consulted with experts from various fields. Yet the more she learned, the more perplexing the mystery became. Thaka's death and resurrection defied all known laws of biology and physics, hinting at forces beyond current scientific understanding. Meanwhile, Unute, haunted by Thaka's return and his cryptic warnings, disappeared once more from the Unute's watchful eyes. He stole a nondescript car and drove for days, finally reaching a remote coastal town. There he sought refuge in an abandoned office building, its windows offering a panoramic view of the desolate landscape below. For days on end, Unute sat motionless, surrounded by an arsenal of weapons, his eyes fixed on the horizon. He seemed to be waiting for something, lost in the labyrinth of his own thoughts and memories. As the sun set on the third day of his vigil, Unute sensed a familiar presence approaching, a darkness he knew all too well. Without turning, he whispered a greeting to the empty room, acknowledging the arrival of an old adversary. The darkness materialized into a tangible form, Babe, a creature as ancient and enigmatic as Unute himself. Babe took the shape of a Babi, a deer pig with enormous, curving tusks that gleamed in the fading light. This was no ordinary animal, but a force of nature, wild and unpredictable, driven by a primal rage and an unwavering hatred for Unute. Back at the Unute's headquarters, Diana, desperate to find Unute and unravel the mystery surrounding Thaka's impossible resurrection, intensified her investigation. She interviewed Keever at length, pressing him for every detail about the incident in the tunnel. Keever, a man of few words, revealed that Unute had been troubled for some time, haunted by the attack perpetrated by Ulafson. He described Unute's growing fascination with the patterns of death, his attempts to communicate with the deceased, and his increasingly erratic behavior. As Diana pieced together the fragments of information, she realized that Unute's behavior was more than just grief or post-traumatic stress. Something deeper and more profound was at work. Something inexorably connected to the Babi rusa, to the impossible events surrounding Thaka's death and resurrection, and to the very nature of Unute's immortality. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, Diana requested a full debriefing, gathering the Unute's top scientists and analysts. Among them was Stephen Caldwell, a brilliant but eccentric archaeologist with a hidden agenda. Caldwell, a tall, thin man with a neatly trimmed beard and a penchant for outdated fashion, had long suspected that Unute was more than just a biological anomaly. He believed that Unute was a conduit to something older, something more powerful, a force that could potentially rewrite the history of humanity and unlock the secrets of the universe itself. During the debriefing, Diana presented her findings, revealing the presence of the Babi rusa at the safe house. Its tracks had been discovered in the tunnel beyond Thaka's body, adding another layer of mystery to the already perplexing situation. Drawing on her extensive research, Diana explained that the Babi rusa was a creature steeped in myth and legend, a symbol of both fertility and destruction. Its enormous tusks were not just weapons, but a testament to its primal power and its connection to forces beyond human comprehension. Diana went on to reveal that Unute had encountered the Babi rusa countless times throughout his long life. Their relationship was one of both fierce animosity and a strange, unspoken kinship, two immortal beings locked in an eternal struggle, each the antithesis of the other. As the debriefing continued, Unute himself arrived, his presence casting a palpable tension over the room. He recounted his long history to Diana and Caldwell, revealing fragments of lost civilizations, forgotten technologies, and the endless cycle of violence that had shaped his existence. His tale spanned eons, painting a picture of a world far older and stranger than any of them had imagined. Unute described a primordial forest, lush and teeming with life, where he had observed a herd of Babi rusas. He watched as they were attacked by predators, driven to the brink of extinction, only to return again and again in a relentless cycle of survival and renewal. He recounted how one of the Babi rusas, a wounded female, had consumed a strange concoction of plants and flowers, a desperate plea for help to powers unknown. In response to her plea, a bolt of blue lightning had struck from a cloudless sky, imbuing her offspring with unnatural strength and resilience. As Unute's tale unfolded, Diana felt a chill run down her spine. She realized that the Babi rusa was more than just a creature of instinct and aggression. It was a conduit to something older, something more powerful, a force that could reshape reality itself. Driven by this realization, she rushed to the lab where the Babi rusa's remains were being analyzed. What Diana witnessed in the lab defied all scientific explanation. The flesh and bone of the Babi rusa, which should have been decaying, were instead congealing, reforming, and growing into a large, leathery egg. As she watched in horror and fascination, the egg pulsed with an otherworldly energy. Diana knew, with a certainty that transcended scientific reasoning, that from this egg would emerge another creature like Unute, an immortal being born of lightning and primal forces. Unute, sensing Diana's discovery, followed her to the lab. He stood in silence, watching the throbbing egg with a mixture of resignation and regret. His eyes, filled with the weight of centuries, spoke of countless similar moments throughout history, cycles of death and rebirth that seemed to mock the very concept of mortality. As the implications of their discoveries sank in, the members of the unit grappled with the enormity of what they had uncovered. Stonier, still haunted by the loss of his husband Thaka, struggled to cope with his grief in light of these new revelations. The possibility that death might not be as final as once thought both tormented and tantalized him. Caldwell, seizing the opportunity presented by these extraordinary circumstances, approached Stonier with a proposition. He spoke of a new mission, a chance to make a difference in a world where the lines between life and death had become blurred. Caldwell revealed that he was working on a secret project, an ambitious attempt to harness Unute's powers and create a new breed of immortal warriors. Stonier, desperate for a purpose and a way to honor Thaka's memory, agreed to help. Together, they delved into Caldwell's clandestine research, poring over ancient texts, deciphering cryptic symbols, and experimenting with technologies that pushed the boundaries of known science. As the unit's research progressed, the lines between science and magic continued to blur. Diana, studying the Babi rusa's remains and the enigmatic egg, discovered that its tusks held a strange, resonant energy. This energy seemed to connect to something older and more powerful than anything they had encountered before, perhaps the very source of Unute's immortality. Caldwell, meanwhile, pieced together fragments of information from ancient texts and Unute's own cryptic revelations. He became convinced that he was on the verge of unlocking the secrets of immortality, of tapping into the source of Unute's power and reshaping the very fabric of reality. Unute, sensing the shift in the unit's research and the dangerous path they were treading, grew increasingly uneasy. He felt a growing sense of dread, a premonition of something terrible to come. The weight of his long existence, the countless cycles of violence and rebirth he had witnessed, pressed down upon him with renewed force. Unable to stand idly by, Unute confronted Diana and Caldwell. He demanded to know what they were doing, what forces they were attempting to unleash. His words carried the weight of millennia, a warning from one who had seen civilizations rise and fall through their own hubris. Diana, torn between her scientific curiosity and her growing concern for Unute and the potential consequences of their research, pressed on with her work. She knew that she was on the verge of a breakthrough, but she also recognized the dangerous precipice upon which they all stood. The Babirusa's power was a double-edged sword, capable of both creation and unimaginable destruction. Caldwell, driven by his own ambitions and the tantalizing promise of immortality, continued his clandestine research. He ignored Unute's warnings, convinced that he could control the forces he was attempting to harness. His eyes gleamed with a fervent light, his mind filled with visions of a world reshaped by his discoveries. Unute, realizing the futility of his warnings and sensing the growing danger, disappeared once more. He sought refuge in the wilderness, far from the machinations of the unit and the relentless march of their research. For months, he wandered through forests and deserts, scaling mountains and traversing valleys, seeking solace in the silence of the natural world. He struggled to make sense of his own existence, to find meaning in the endless cycle of his immortality. During his solitary journey, Unute encountered the Babirusa again. In a remote desert, under the light of a full moon, they clashed in a primal battle, a struggle between two forces of nature, two children of the lightning. Their fight was epic in scale, shaking the earth and scarring the landscape. When it was over, Unute, wounded but alive, watched as the Babirusa retreated, disappearing into the vastness of the desert. In that moment, he felt a strange sense of kinship with the creature, recognizing their shared burden of immortality and the relentless cycle of violence and rebirth that defined their existence. Changed by his experiences and carrying the weight of new insights, Unute returned to the unit. His eyes now held a new weariness, a deeper understanding of the nature of existence and the forces that shape the universe. He confronted Diana and Caldwell one final time, demanding to know what they had done, what they had unleashed in their quest for knowledge and power. Diana, her own conscience troubled by the path their research had taken, revealed the full extent of their discoveries. She spoke of the Babirusa's regenerative abilities, of the strange energies they had detected, and of Caldwell's attempts to harness these powers to create a new breed of immortal beings. Caldwell, his eyes gleaming with a manic intensity, defended his actions. He argued passionately that he was on the verge of a breakthrough, that he could unlock the secrets of immortality and change the world forever. In his mind, the potential benefits outweighed any risks, the end justifying the means. Unute listened to their explanations, his heart filled with a profound sadness. He recognized in Caldwell's ambitions the same hubris that had led to the fall of countless civilizations throughout history. He knew, with the certainty born of millennia of experience, that the Babirusa's power was too dangerous to control, too volatile to be harnessed by human hands. With a heavy heart, burdened by the weight of his own immortality and the knowledge of what was to come, Unute made his decision. He turned away from the unit, from the scientists and soldiers who sought to unravel the mysteries of his existence. He chose once more the path of solitude, seeking refuge in the wilderness that had been both his sanctuary and his prison throughout the long centuries of his life. As Unute disappeared into the unknown, he left behind a legacy of questions unanswered and mysteries unsolved. The unit, its members forever changed by their encounter with the immortal man and the forces he represented, was left to grapple with the consequences of their actions and the profound implications of their discoveries. In the end, Unute's tale remained unfinished, a story without end, much like the man himself. His future, like his past, stretched out into eternity, a testament to the enduring mystery of existence and the indomitable spirit of life itself. If you enjoyed this book breakdown, please consider liking this video and subscribing to get notified when we post our next breakdown.